You're listening to Sort of Spiritual. Not too long ago, I never would have called myself a spiritual person. But in the past few years, I've gone from being broke, sick all the time, feeling trapped in a job that made me miserable, to easily building a 6-figure business, finding the most incredible partner, and creating the freedom to live my life. And along the way, it looks like I've become sort of spiritual. In this podcast, I'm going to bring you the most impactful tools and lessons I've found for personal and spiritual growth. In Season 1, we're diving into human design, my favorite tool for self-awareness, easy alignment, and the catalyst behind my massive life upgrade. I'm so grateful you've chosen to join me on this journey. Let's get into it. Hello, welcome. I'm your host, Katie. Today we are talking about authority. It's one of my favorite things in human design because it can make such an impact. And we are going to be getting into the actual what of the authorities in this episode. And then in the next episode, we are going to get into how to actually experiment with them and implement them, because the knowledge is great, cool, love learning stuff, but it's not going to do you any good if you don't know how to actually integrate and embody this in your own life. So today we're talking about what is authority, a little bit about the authority hierarchy, and about each individual authority. You are only going to have one authority technically, although you may have other influences, but that's a conversation for another day. And it can be so helpful when you're learning your own authority to also learn about the different authorities. One, because that contrast helps you get more clear on what your authority actually is and how you are designed to make your best decisions, but it can also give you so much compassion and space for other people's processes, because we are not all alike. I remember I had a coach once who was like, you know what the decision is, you know, it's in your gut, you know. And flash forward a couple years when we know about human design, and she was a sacral authority and assumed that everyone had that gut knowing like she did. So it can really help you to understand how different people operate. I also mentioned a little bit in this episode about the types and their strategies. If you're not familiar with them, do not worry about it right now. I will have episodes for each coming out, but you might hear me say something like manifestors inform or generators are here to respond. So if you know what I'm talking about, cool. If you don't, just let it roll right off you and know that you will be getting all the details as the episodes continue to drop. Like I mentioned in the first episode, human design's a quantum system. So there's all these different pieces that come together, and episode by episode, I'm giving you puzzle pieces that we can put together to get it to all make sense. I've also created a cheat sheet for you because while I certainly hope to entertain you a little bit, I'm here to teach human design. I know you're probably not listening at your desk making notes. If you are, cool, but my community has loved the cheat sheets that I've created in the past for them, for the gates and for the channels. So I thought it would be fun to make cheat sheets for the podcast. So you can get this one at sortofspiritual.com/authority. So you have something to easily reference what we've learned, and you can enjoy listening on a nice walk or tidying up or whatever you do when you listen to podcasts. The link will be in the show notes, so you don't need to remember it, but it's going to be a great resource for you. I also mentioned in this episode the centers when I talk about the hierarchy. So again, this will be in the cheat sheet. If you don't know what the centers are, if you don't know which ones I'm talking about, no worries at all. Sometimes when I hear myself talking about this, I just finished editing the core of this episode. Like there's this way the stars and planets have created for us to operate and make our best decisions. Sometimes it still feels a little too out there for me. But then I look at my life. I look where rational, logical, mental, mind-based decisions got me. Divorced, working a safe job that barely paid me anything. I was up to my eyeballs in credit card debt, but I could get promoted. There was a succession plan. I had benefits. These logical, rational, mental decisions had me miserable, had me sick. I really got to the point where I felt I had nothing to lose. So I surrendered to this experiment here. I don't I don't know if surrendered is the right word, because I find that surrender makes it all seem like a piece of cake. And there was definitely struggle along the way, but my life has only gotten better in every single way. Sometimes I feel like an evangelist or something for this, but I will say this again and again. I do not care about human design. I care about you knowing your truth, about you feeling peace, about you reconnecting to yourself and the life that your soul wanted before your high school guidance counselor told you that you didn't have the right credits to apply for the program that was your dream, before that person rolled their eyes at you or talked some sense into you, for risking living outside the status quo, for wanting to live. I don't care what gets you there. I just want a world where more of us are there. So when you hear me passionate about this authority thing that might sound like some weird rules, I just want you to give something a try. I want you to breathe life back into you. I know it's there. I've done so many readings. I've been gifted. I'm privileged to see so many people's truths. And it's beautiful. This is what I've been called to share, but this is why I share it. Okay. Let's get into the episode. Let's learn about what this authority thing is. It's gonna be great. Let's go. This is what gets me so excited, because it's really impactful when you understand how to make correct decisions. In human design, the foundation, the two big pieces of human design are strategy and authority. Strategy is how you're designed to interact with the world energetically, where authority is how you're designed to make decisions. There's about 7 or 8 different authorities depending on how you look at them, and I'm going to break them down so we have different ways of making decisions from one another. But this is the piece to understand. Our mind is not our authority. Our mind is great for so many things, but our authority really lives elsewhere in our body. So in the next episode, I'll go into this whole mental decision thing a little bit more, but learning authority is really about learning to trust something other than your mind, your logic, your rationale. These can all be great things. They just don't make great decisions that are aligned with who we're here to be. I like to say that your authority is your Google Maps to alignment, because as long as you are making correct decisions, you're going to be getting closer and closer to your alignment, to who you really are, to who you're designed to be. If you do nothing else with human design, and this may be a controversial opinion, if you do nothing else but learn how to make decisions that feel good and that can free you from the mental anxiety we often feel around decisions, I think that would be such a gift. So hopefully that's something that I can put you on the path with this episode, but we're going to dive in to what the authorities are first. Again, authority is how you are designed to make the best decisions for you. We have the emotional authority. This is the most common. About 50% of the population has emotional authority. Then we have sacral authority, which is about 30% of the population. Splenic authority, which is about 10% of the population. Then we have ego authority, self-projected authority, environmental authority. This one also has a couple of other names, which I'll talk about when I go into each authority, as well as the lunar authority. So those are the 7 main authorities. Some of them are broken down into little subgroups, while really just the ego authority. So I'm going to talk about that when we break it down. I really want to emphasize this before we get into what the authorities are. They are not as complicated as your mind wants to make them out to be. They're really not. They're pretty simple for the most part. What can be complicated or tricky is trusting them, because for most people, we have not been operating using our authority. I say most, not all, because I definitely do come across people, especially I would say those with sacral authorities. I sometimes come across people with sacral authority that just get it, that they've been using it. And I think sacral authority is one of the easier ones, but not that it's a competition, it doesn't matter. The point being, they are different from how we've been operating, generally speaking, for most people. So the difficulty comes in, how do I trust my authority, not what is the authority? And I think our mind likes to make the authority a lot more complicated than it really needs to be. And the best thing that you can do to understand your authority is to experiment with it so you can really embody it and trust it. Let's start off. We're going to go in the order of authorities. So there is an order to authorities. There's a hierarchy. What I mean by a hierarchy is that the first authority, or the top of the hierarchy, is emotional authority. If you have the emotional solar plexus center defined, if you don't know what that is, I will link a YouTube video that I have on the centers in the show notes, so you can check that out if you want to learn more. But if you have the emotional solar plexus defined on your chart, colored in, that is going to be your authority. If you don't have that, then the next one's going to be sacral. If you don't have that, then the next one's going to be splenic, etc. So I'm going to teach these in the order of the hierarchy, and that's all that you need to know about that. Don't get stressed out about it. The emotional authority. This is my authority. It's probably the one that I'm the most passionate about, and it is one of the ones that's a little bit more complicated. I'm going to make an entire episode on emotional authority coming out soon, but it's also not that complicated, okay? Anyone can have this authority except for reflectors, so any of the other types can have it. And like I said, it's the highest up on the hierarchy. So 50% of people have it. It's the most popular one. And I think that's really interesting because there's this quote, I don't remember who says it, but this idea in business that successful people make decisions quickly. Not the case if you have emotional authority. Emotional authority, despite the name saying emotional in it, you're actually designed to make decisions when you are not emotional. So the idea behind emotional authority is that you need time for clarity. You need to be able to ride the highs and lows of your emotions and come to a place of neutrality or clarity when you make a decision. Now, if this is new for you, you might be like me when I first heard about it and I was like, how is this useful? I need time to make decisions. Cool, that doesn't tell me anything. And I totally get it if that's where you're at. However, as I continued down the rabbit hole of human design and continued just really feeling like there was something in human design for me to get, the more I tried to learn about emotional authority, the more I really started to experiment with it and integrate it and looked back to see what these spontaneous decisions in my life were and how they turned out. I really started to see the value in waiting for clarity. As an emotional person, you are not meant to be making spontaneous decisions. Ra Uru Hu, the creator of human design, often said there is no truth in the now for emotional authorities. And so you may not really have a good connection, let's say, to your emotions. So you might not necessarily feel really high and really low for all these decisions that you're making throughout your life, but you definitely know about time. So you can definitely know that a day has passed, 2 days have passed, 3 days have passed. So if there's big decisions, the place to start with experimenting is just giving yourself time. And it can be challenging for emotional authorities because when you're really excited about something, you don't want to wait for clarity. You want to do the thing right now. And that's where you get into trouble with emotional authority because you are so high on these emotions, you're so excited, they cloud your view. And so you can't see things clearly. Just as if you are feeling really down or, kind of depressed or angry or whatever, you aren't seeing clearly. Emotions really cloud our ability to make good decisions. The idea with emotional authority is that in the moment is not a place of clarity, so wait it out. And what you want with emotional authority is to come to a place of just like neutral confidence of like, yeah, I think that's the right decision. And I'll give you a quick example for this one from my own experience. When I've hired coaches in the past, the very first coach I ever hired was such a mistake for me. It was very high pressure sales and it was a very emotional decision. I felt so desperate. I felt like if I didn't hire her, I was never going to be successful things were never going to work. And I mean, her sales call process very much put me in that emotional state as well. It was designed to. So it was a little bit manipulative, as I'm sure some of you have experienced in terms of being sold to. And so I was really in an emotional state. I was not in a place of clarity. And when I said I wanted time to think about it, it was like more pressure and more emotion. So I ended up saying yes in the moment. And it ended up really just not being a good match for me. It was not very supportive. I won't go into the details. However, compare that decision to a coach that I hired probably 2 years ago at this point. And I wasn't like super excited about it. I was just like, yeah, cool. This feels good. Gave myself a couple of days, learned about the program, had a conversation with her, and then was like, yeah, I'll get back to you in a couple days. And then when I decided to make the decision, it was like, yeah, cool. This feels good. And I think sometimes for emotional authority, that can be a little bit tricky because we think decisions should be like, yes, oh my God, best decision ever. And that's not the kind of decisions that we're designed to make. Anyways, I won't go too much deeper into this because like I said, I do want to create an episode for emotional authorities. So you're looking for that kind of confident, neutral feeling of like, yeah, this is good. You're going to be 70% sure about something. It's not going to be often anyways, a 100% absolute yes, I know this, or no even. Although I do find the no's are a lot more clear than the yeses with emotional authority. With all of that being said, let's move on to the very clear yes or no authority, which is the sacral authority. Only generator types, and by that I mean generators and manifesting generators, will have the sacral authority because they're the only types that have the sacral center, and that's what this authority is all about. With this authority, you're designed to get a strong gut yes or a gut no, and it often shows up as an actual guttural sound. And every culture that I've come across so far has these kind of guttural sounds that are going to be some version of for yes or for no. And there's variations depending on where you come from. But if you look at children, you'll see them 100% all the time walking around with the or And it's interesting because, speaking of children, we often get really conditioned out of speaking that way and using those guttural sounds as children because they're not polite. Our parents tell us to say yes, please, or our teachers say no, thank you. So often a lot of generator types get conditioned out of those guttural sounds, which conditions them out of really connecting to their truth. Now, it's not only guttural sounds that sacral authorities connect to. Sacrals are designed to respond to the world around them. So they can respond in more ways than just guttural sounds, although traditionally human design, that's what it teaches. What I find is that in addition to those guttural sounds, that or you also have body movements. I notice the body movements tend to be more common in manifesting generators than generators, but I like to share this with clients when I work with them just to give them a few different options of how their authority might show up if they have a sacral authority. What that could be as a yes, you might feel like a movement towards something where it's like you get a little bit closer, you're leaning in, and that might be the yes for you versus moving away or kind of like turning your body away, that's a no. And same with the feeling of expansion where something's like a yes and it's just like this expansive feeling versus like a no, which is like a close off, like ugh. And another thing I've come to learn about generators as well, including manifesting generators, is sometimes the no is more of like it's just not a yes. That's something to be aware of as well. I often say with sacral authorities, if it is not a hell yes, it's a no. And so that's something, again, to experiment with for yourself and see how that really plays out for you. Now, there is a caveat here with the 3420 channel. If you are a manifesting generator with a 3420 channel, so you'll see this line that goes up from the sacral on the left-hand side of the chart up to the throat, you might just have whatever words kind of come out of your mouth. So it's a little bit more of like a blurt approach to the authority as opposed to the guttural sounds. So it could be like a yup or no, or like something like that. It might just be whatever comes out, because when you have that sacral connection directly to the throat, it's like that sacral energy moves so quickly, it just like flies right by the guttural sounds and goes to your throat and out your mouth. So experiment with trusting whatever just comes out that's really unfiltered. Remembering that sacral authority is in response, and that's how generators work, it's really helpful to practice this authority if you don't feel really connected with it, with people outside of you, right? That's how this is designed to work, is outside. So it's helpful to have other people ask you yes or no questions to help you reconnect with that. And it's also helpful in any scenario to be asked yes or no questions as opposed to open-ended questions. For example, if you're trying to figure out where to go on vacation with a generator, instead of asking, where do you want to go on vacation, which is an open-ended question, and they're kind of like, because their sacral doesn't have, it can't answer that. It's not a yes or no. What can be helpful is to ask, do you want to go to Italy? And then it's like, or it might be somewhere like, And sometimes I find what can be really helpful with sacral authorities is to get more specific. So if it's kind of like it's not a yes or it's not a no to go to Italy, okay, let's get more specific. Do you want to go to Rome? Do you want to go to Florence? Do you want to go to Venice? Do you want to go to the Amalfi Coast? And so it's like, okay, cool. So they did want to go to Italy, but it was just somewhere specific. Narrowing things down and getting more specific can be helpful for sacral authorities to get that clarity when you narrow it down, so you really know what it is that you want. And really play with that. Play with the sounds, play with anything outside of you in your environment on Instagram, looking in your fridge, looking at a menu of like what's an and what's an for you, and really start rebuilding that yes, no, guttural connection to your sacral center of what your truth really is for you. Splenic authority is our next authority. It's only about 10% of the population, so already we're getting a lot more sort of niche in our authority. It's not a very common one. And with splenic authority, only manifestors and projectors will have this authority. The splenic authority is usually quiet and quick and in the moment, and it's really your first instinct. The spleen is all about keeping you safe, it's about survival, and it's in the now. So if you have an instinct to do something now, and you're like, maybe I'll do that tomorrow, it's not necessarily going to be correct for you tomorrow. The spleen is very in the moment, quick, quiet, and right now. I find that the splenic authority seems to be the most difficult for my clients to connect with. It could be that some of the lesser common authorities are more difficult. I just don't have the same sample size because they're far less common. But of the clients that I work with, the splenic authority really does seem to be the trickiest. I think it's because it's quiet often, not always, but 90% of the time it's quiet, where it's just like this little whisper of a thing inside of you. And I also think because it's quiet, we have a lifetime of ignoring our spleen, our intuition, however you want to look at it. And so we don't even notice it. And it really can take some time to rebuild that awareness with your spleen. And specifically for the spleen, although I think this could be helpful for pretty much any of the authorities, spending some time alone so you have that quiet space and cultivating intentional quiet time where you're not really busy and distracted. You're not watching Netflix, or you're not listening to books, or you're not reading, or you're not whatever it is, you're not on social media. You actually have time that's quiet, whether you're meditating or just going for a walk by yourself. Giving yourself some time where there's no outside influence, I think can start to help you get that connection back with your spleen and start to hear those pieces from your spleen. I also think in general, and this kind of goes hand in hand, you need to slow it down. If you have this authority, it means you're either a projector or a manifestor. You are not meant to be busy, going all the time. And if you are, you probably are ignoring your spleen because I'm sure it's screaming at you to slow down. But you're also likely to just be too busy. And it's difficult for the right things to find you, for your spleen to tell you the right things to come your way when you're just so busy all the time. So that's always a potential as well. You need to clear some space for this authority to really reconnect with you if you feel like you've lost that connection with your spleen. The next authority is the ego authority, and this is going to, again, be only for projectors or manifestors, and it operates a little bit differently depending on who this is for in terms of manifestors or projectors. Generally, the ego authority is really around, do you have the will to follow through? The ego center is also called the will center, which is also called the heart center, and so it's this idea, do you have the will to follow through? One of the things that's really helpful for this center is to take really good care of your will center and to take good rest. Karen Curry often says that if you have a defined will center, you need to be taking 2 days a week off minimum. And we also have this tendency to fake rest when we have a defined will center. What I mean by that is we're like, yeah, I took the whole weekend off. And it's like, you remodeled your kitchen on Saturday, and then on Sunday, you cooked 7 meals and joined a virtual business conference and read a personal development book. That's not off. That's not relaxing. That's not resourcing yourself. So you really want to be able to take good care of yourself and your energy to help build that will connection and to take good care of that will center. With the ego manifested version of this is like a blurt it out kind of an authority. You're going to have the will center connected some way to your throat, and you're really designed to blurt out like what's on your heart, what's on your will, what are you creating, what impact are you creating? And you need to verbalize that and to get that out. As a manifestor, you're here to inform. So through this informing piece with the ego authority, it's like blurt out those informings. Really go after what your heart wants. Embrace being big energy. Embrace being too much for some people. Really, with the ego authorities, what is best for you, it might seem selfish, but it's really going to be best for everyone else around you as well, or they wouldn't be around you. That's kind of one of those like sneaky little things with this human design. If you have the ego authority, what's best for you is going to be best for the people around you, and it's getting used to that and really learning to trust that. For ego projected authority, you're really magnetizing life to you. So it's really about waiting for those invitations as a projector and then looking at what's best for me. Again, this is something that can feel selfish, but what's best for you is going to be best for everyone around you. Is this best for me? How does this benefit me? How does this affect me? You really want to be looking at that. And it's still very much that like heart-led, will-led decision-making process of what's best for me, like what's on my heart. Is this it? And if it is, and it's a great invitation for you, amazing. Move forward with that decision. But on a day-to-day, it's really leading with that heart-centered energy of what's best for me, and knowing that as you do this, you will magnetize the right people, you will magnetize the right things into your life, and it's going to be best for people around you as well. You also want to be mindful, whether you're a projector or a manifestor with this energy, that you're not running on fumes of your will center. I know I mentioned this already, but I just want to really emphasize, you need to rest. You need to take care of yourself. It's so important. Self-projected authority is next. This is an authority only projectors will have, and you will have the self or the identity or the G center, whichever you want to call it, connected to the throat in some way. You are here to talk it out. These are people that make decisions by talking them out loud. It's usually helpful to have someone to talk to. You don't want to be getting their feedback. You don't want their opinion. You just need someone to like talk at almost. And so it can be helpful to prime people. And I find people with this authority usually know. They usually do this. They've usually done it their entire life. But sometimes there's conditioning of like, oh, I care too much about what other people think, or this is annoying, or people get frustrated when they give me their opinions and then I don't take them. That's not what this is about. So it can be really helpful if you have this authority to have your people that you can have these conversations with, but to also preface it if you haven't already, or if you don't already, with, hey, I just need to talk this out. Can I just talk out loud for a second? I don't really want any like opinions or feedback. I just need to talk this out. And then that way they're like, yeah, okay, cool, go. And it's almost like they don't even need to be listening. They just need to be there for you to get the words out for. Usually as you're talking, you'll come to the decision yourself, because your voice really is what brings you clarity when you have self-projected authority. If you don't have someone to talk to, I recommend making a voice note. Because if you don't get clarity through just speaking the words, what's helpful is having someone else reflect back to you what your energy was like around it. Let's say you're trying to decide on two different career paths. And to you, there's pros and cons for both. They both seem really great. They could both be great opportunities. As you're talking it out, you're talking about this first option and it has this and it has that. And then the second option, like, oh, it could be so amazing. And you will probably notice your own energy shift, but in the event that you don't, the person that you're talking to, they can reflect that back to you. Where it's like the first one, you seemed kind of flat and like, and then the second one, you were like, oh my gosh, your energy totally shifted. I got goosebumps just listening to you talk about it. That can really help you get clarity. And like I said, if you don't have someone else to reflect that back to you, a voice note can be helpful for yourself. You can also potentially journal it out with this one, but it really is about your voice, clarity coming through your voice. Experiment, find out what works for you, but it really is about the voice with the self-projected authority. You'll hear what's right for you as you talk it out. This is Editing Katie here to say hello. When I talk about this next authority, I mention Jovian. This is a website where you can get your free human design chart, Jovian Archive. So that's what I'm talking about when I mention Jovian. I don't personally love this version, and it also makes this whole next authority a little bit confusing for some people. So when I talk about Jovian, that's what I'm talking about. We're on to our second last authority. This is the authority with many, many names. This is often called the sounding board authority or the environmental authority or the mental authority or the outer authority, or sometimes, especially if you look up charts on Jovian, this will often say that there is no authority. So there's two authorities that will show up on Jovian that will say none beside authority. What your chart will look like if you have this environmental or sounding board authority on Jovian is you will have something colored in. So something near the top head of the chart, you will have either two shapes or three shapes colored in or defined. You have this authority. If it says none, but you have nothing colored in on the chart, that means you're a reflector. You're going to have lunar authority, which I'm going to talk about next. For this one, the environmental or the sounding board authority, there's two components to this. One is really the environmental piece, and the other is the sounding board piece. The environment part is really that people who have this tend to need a good environment to make decisions in. Often they will have a certain coffee shop that they like to go and a certain seat they like to sit in there where they feel like they can really think clearly and make good decisions. So that's part of it, having an environment that works for you, that feels supportive for you. Maybe you like to go on a specific walk or a drive and you feel like you get clarity in that environment. And then the second part is the sounding board. This is going to sound quite similar to the self-projected authority, although it's a little bit different. But the idea is that you are really designed to talk it out or have a sounding board with different people. If it's a big decision, ideally you're going to do this with 3 people, and it doesn't have to be 3 people at once. Take your time and have these conversations over time. You'll have these people as your sounding boards. They're not necessarily giving their opinion, but they're reflecting back what they're hearing you say and what your energy is like when you're talking about these things. Alone time can also be really helpful because if you have this authority, you're going to have a lot of openness in your chart, and getting out of other people's conditioning and other people's auras can be helpful to get clarity. So finally, our last authority is the lunar authority, and only reflectors are going to have this authority. They are tied to the moon. Reflectors are lunar beings. The rest of us are solar beings. So they are designed to wait a lunar cycle, which is about 28 days when it comes to making decisions. And they might need more than one lunar cycle. The idea really with this authority is that you are designed to take your time. And I love this image because if you imagine as the moon circles the earth, how it's going to see the earth from so many different angles. Can you just imagine being up in space, orbiting the earth, and how different it would look from one side of the earth to the other side of the earth, right? And so it's similar to that when it comes to reflectors making decisions. It's almost like they're little moons orbiting their own world. And as they go around this process of 28 days, they're going to see so many different perspectives. They're going to experience things differently. And that can really affect how they make decisions because they get such a different perspective as they take this orbit around the Earth. So with reflectors, when it comes to making decisions, you really want to pay attention to how you feel about something over time. So spontaneity is not the name of the game for decisions when it comes to reflectors, especially when it comes to big decisions. My friend Amanda Prischel from Reflector Life talks about journaling out about decisions over the course of a month. And she'll find that decisions will just tend to fall off. If she starts journaling about something at the beginning of the month that she's trying to make a decision on, if it's not the right decision, at the end of the month, it'll just fall off. She'll just forget about it as if it was never even a decision to make. And that's a pretty clear way to know that it's not actually something for you. This was probably someone else's energy that you were picking up, and you can just let it go. Reflectors can also soundboard like the previous one of having some confidants, some people that are close to them, where it's not about opinions, it's not about feedback, but it's just about bouncing these ideas and these conversations off people over time. It's really about taking your time to make decisions. And I totally get how, well, I mean, I don't totally get, but I can empathize at how tricky that is to take a month to make decisions. This is where I invite you to experiment. For reflectors, being in the right environment is also crucial to their health, their happiness, their success, everything in their life. So that's going to have a big impact on their decisions as well. I also want to add this in. I came across an older text a while back from Richard Rudd when he was in his human design days. So if you're not familiar with Richard Rudd, he is the creator of Gene Keys, which is like a sister to human design. And he talked about eating and human design types when it comes to authorities. One of the things that he said about reflectors is that you're here to digest anything that comes your way without being afraid of it. That's really specifically meant about food, but I like looking at that as kind of a broader perspective when it comes to the little day-to-day decisions, because you can't wait a month to make every decision, right? You need to decide some things in the moment. Of course, we all do. But it really is this idea that reflectors can handle a lot. They are so resilient and they can take all these small day-to-day decisions that come at them. It's the big ones that need time. And again, going back to this idea of finding the right environment and the right community for reflectors is going to help you make a lot more correct decisions. There we have it, the authorities, how you are designed to make decisions that are right for you, your personal Google Maps to alignment. Remember to get your cheat sheet with all the notes at sortofspiritual.com/authority. Of course, I'll also link it in the show notes for you, and get ready for the next episode coming on Thursday, all about how to experiment with your authority and start implementing it in your own life. Thank you so much for listening. Share this with a friend if you think they would also love human design. I appreciate you so much. Have a wonderful day, you beautiful human.